I can either cancel that person, or I could try to open my heart to understand what led them to say the thing. On the other side of that, if I feel very strongly about something, I want to make sure that I'm saying it in a way that does try to empathize on certain levels.
Welcome back to the Anything But Quiet Time podcast. We are Rachelle and Carder. Weekly, we have this conversation. You're invited to be a part of it. Any feedback, any comments you want to share when you subscribe, for example, to our YouTube channel, you can comment on there. I guess you can technically comment without subscribing if you want to. You can also make comments on Apple, too, if you're listening to this. So.
I want to kind of start where we left off.
You were going to talk about passing the baton.
Which we brought up this reference on our radio show about, the Olympics and everything.
Yeah.
With the passing of the baton and the strategizing of making sure that you not just hand it off correctly, but are maybe, I don't know if slowing is the correct word, but making sure your hand is just in the right place.
Yep.
And we've seen those tragic, because there's no other word for it, those tragic moments where it doesn't get passed.
It happened in the Olympics a couple of times, I think, with the Americans.
Really?
Early 2000s, I want to say it happened once. And it's just, there was so much frustration because, they practiced that a million times.
Yeah.
It's a true handoff. Both parties are responsible.
And I have no idea what happened there, but it does make you wonder, if I'm messing up that part, did I practice on the running of the course too much? And practice on focusing on my own speed as opposed to practicing with the other person.
Concentrating on that, yeah.
And so this is where I'm going with that. Going over what I'm going through in my quiet time. I've just gone through King Solomon. I even shared in the last couple of podcasts about how tragic a figure I think he is. And the passing of the baton of kingship to his son was already going to be a stinky thing, because God told him through a prophet that he was not going to have the whole kingdom anymore. His line, it was going to be broken up between Israel and Judah. Judah, that'll stay your part, but the rest of it is going elsewhere. And a guy named Jeroboam takes over the rest of it, while Judah remains with Solomon's line, and Rehoboam takes the king, and takes the throne. And Rehoboam is Solomon's kid, and he does all the bad stuff that Solomon knew that he shouldn't be doing, that Solomon did. And when I say knew he shouldn't be, fully aware of what he should not have been doing, because this is the guy we get so many proverbs from, the Song of Solomon, the book of Ecclesiastes, these incredible testimonies of what really matters and should matter and be prioritized.
Yeah, what true wisdom is.
People came from all over the world to sit at the feet of Solomon and just listen to the things he would say. It's what it says in Scripture. Where was his child? Was Solomon so focused on his own run that he failed the baton pass off? And it's just one of those reminders to me with my own children. We share stories every day, you and I, about instances at a store or just anything that can happen in life where we encounter things that, no, that's not good. That shouldn't be happening. We might witness somebody else doing a thing, or even ourselves doing something that's not in line with what God would have people doing, right? And I don't ever want to assume that my kids know that, or they overheard me telling somebody else that was sitting at the feet. I'm putting that in quotes, by the way, if you're listening only, at the feet of Rachelle. Wait, what if I told my children to prepare them? Have I passed the baton? And obviously the main focus of that passing is Jesus Christ.
Yeah, obviously life lessons are included, but the gospel is what's essential if you're a believer in Jesus.
Yeah.
And the idea that our occupation, even if it's ministry, that if our kids aren't in the room, so to speak,
right,
we're doing a disservice to them. We're not leading in that the immediate ministry that I should be leading in is my family. And if I'm concentrating on work, even if it was a pastor, I have to make sure, my family doesn't sacrifice for the ministry. My time with the ministry is sacrificed for my family. It's got to be more of that way. I know there's give and take in all aspects of life, but we cannot fail our kids in this way.
Well, and I think I have to lean in on the promises that Jesus makes us in his Sermon on the Mount. And one of the verses that is a go-to for me in my life, and hopefully it's a standard and not just something I say, but that if I'm seeking God first at the end of the day, then everything else will be taken care of. So if I'm putting things through the Jesus filter, then I am hopefully letting him speak into the prioritizing of my life and my schedule. I'm letting him speak into the time spent with family, and knowing that if I'm obeying him in that, he is going to allow all these things to be added and taken care of in other places. If I'm a pastor and I'm concerned about, do I have enough time to go over things with some of my congregates that need special attention, or even the message? We know in certain instances, not that this should become a regular habit at all, but I've seen pastors put their notes aside and the Holy Spirit has taken over, and they're like, I'm supposed to tell you this today.
Sure.
Like, so if you are in that place, like, I've got to prioritize my kid today, there is nothing else I should be doing because of this, then I really truly believe we have to lean into what we believe God is telling us to do. And we can absolutely trust him with the rest of it, which is kind of, it's a silly thing to say out loud because we know that. But do my actions belie that I know that, or do they fall in line with, oh yeah, no, I see it. Her actions speak to the fact that she knows she can trust God with all these things.
Well, I think where we can go with anything important that we want to get to, it can turn into almost that lose weight mentality.
Yeah.
Once I get past this, then I'll really get serious. And then there's something else that, well, once I get past that, once the school year starts, or what, you know what, we might as well get through Christmas. I'll start in January. Well, you know what, summertime's actually a great time to start.
It's a great time to start.
And I think there are big projects at work, or even with ministry. You know, we had a yearly Easter pageant at our church every year, and I'm sure that the people in charge of it, it's like, hey, this is once a year. I'm going to sacrifice more time to it. The family's going to understand. This is just where we're in. I'm sure they're going to be helping too in some regard.
Yeah.
But that's one thing. But if it turns into, and this next thing next month, and this next thing 3 weeks after that, and it just all of a sudden turns into, no, I'm working 80 hours a week, that's where it gets really unbalanced.
I have to be mindful of the words. You always say that.
Yeah. True.
If you hear that from your kids, now maybe they're just trying to get your goats to, you give in and get them an extra toy or something. But you always say that. Oh, do I? Then it's become the rule. It's not the exception.
Sure.
And so that was just, here's a Bible encounter with look at the company I'm keeping if I am one of those parents that's been putting my focus and pouring into something that's not my best use of time. I'm keeping company with who was deemed the wisest man who ever lived.
Yeah.
But not so wise in that.
I didn't apply it very well. Yeah, I think this is also an interesting point for anybody that might be a teenager or really regardless of age that isn't married.
Yeah.
And if that is ever a concern about career, but I think more so, I really want to be in ministry and I'm concerned about this. This is where I think we just should give kudos to singleness and go, listen, if you want to dedicate your life to ministry, Jesus did it. Paul may have been married at some point, but certainly at some point was, for whatever reason, was single and promoted singleness. And the idea that if you really want to give yourself to ministry, then go for it.
Yeah.
And we should applaud that, and we shouldn't think that it's got to be marriage and then it's got to be this. And then, so I don't know, if you're in that position, especially if you're young, but really if you're just single and you're like, I don't know if I can balance that, then don't. Then don't if you want to choose that.
And then if you go back and say, you know what, I think I'm ready now.
Then do it. Yeah.
There is no legislature that has to, it has to look like this.
Yeah, true.
Because God made us different.
Yep.
And so there was that. There was also something else I experienced recently. There's this king named Asa, and it'll connect to my own life here in a second. King Asa was a pretty good king. And he was of the line of Solomon. And for some reason, somebody passed the baton in a way that he received God's instruction. And he wasn't perfect in everything, whoever is, except for Jesus. But he did, like, he put away the idols and things like that. He didn't tear down the shrines, the local shrines or anything. But he really cleaned up the kingdom. He did a good job. But towards the end of his life, it says that he had a foot disease. And for whatever reason, never sought God about it. I mean, he went to many physicians and he eventually died. Well, of course he died. He lived thousands of years ago and he's still alive. No.
And that guy's my neighbor.
But his feet. Oh. But it's interesting because in the Kings version of the story, and right now I'm in 1 Kings, it doesn't necessarily say he didn't seek God. It just said he died. He had a foot disease and he died. But I was watching a television show with my kids, and I love how Hollywood makes Christians look like dorks. I'm being very sarcastic. Okay, just big dorks. And the story of Asa comes up in this episode of House. This is an old show, right? My kids haven't seen these yet. And King Asa is brought up, and it's, he never sought God on his healing. And I thought, that's interesting because I just read his story. It must be in Chronicles, in First Chronicles, that this is an account of. And I don't know if it's first or second, so don't quote me on that. But I did go back and review, and sure enough, it said that. And it's not so much that it wasn't that God was angry at him for going to a doctor, but he never sought him out. So the other day I wake up and I have a migraine. And if you've ever had a migraine, the throbbing, like you can't function, like, because everything that helps you function is in your head helmet.
What a medical phrase.
There you go. It's in your skull. And if that's hurting, then ain't nothing getting by, right? So I was like thinking about the process of going to the cupboard slowly, with every step trying not to make that throbbing worse. And I'm thinking about this in my mind before even going anywhere. How many minutes is it going to take for that medicine to activate in my body? And I don't even have the strong stuff, do I? Do I have the good migraine stuff? And then it hits me. Pray.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Why was my first instinct to think of medicine? Because I've been conditioned in a world that, hey, if we have medicine available, why wouldn't you take it?
Well, sure.
If something hurts, why wouldn't you go to a doctor?
Yeah.
But it also helped me review in my mind the steps that I need to take before going and seeing a doctor. Lord, I hurt really bad, and I know there's medicine in the cabinet. And you don't have to do this, but I'd be a fool not to ask you. Your will be done if somehow me having this migraine brings glory to you. And Lord, strange things have brought about your glory, in scripture and otherwise. So far be it from me to say, oh, this could never bring you glory. But if it's okay with you, can you help me? And I took my hands and I placed them over my head helmet, as I said. And I just kind of went back over from my forehead to the back of my head like that. And as it was moving over my head, it went away.
Wow. Yeah.
Like the throbbing stopped. I went to the cupboard. I took the medicine. And for the most part, I could feel the lingering of the, if you've had a migraine, then you know what I'm talking about. It's not quite a vice, but it's loosened. And I was fine. My husband even asked me, he's like, are you still okay? I'm doing all right.
Yeah.
And then here's another silly example. I got a towel rack. This has nothing to do with medical needs here.
Okay.
Here's a towel rack. And this thing had a little bracket that you screw into the wall. You put the towel rack piece over it. And then there's a screw that goes in the bottom that kind of makes it stick to the bracket. This towel rack's little place that you put the towel doesn't move. It's immobile. And so the precarious positioning of getting that screw into that piece to affix it to the bracket. Carder, it felt like I'm not a genius here. I can only do so much. Thank you for this pitiful, what are those wrenches called? The stupid Allen wrenches.
Yeah.
It can barely get it up against the wall, which is flush with the thing, which needs to go in the... I mean, I tried and tried and tried. And then my fingers started like freaking out on me. And like all of a sudden, whoops, I threw it. And then my son had to try to find it. And then I found it again. And then I tried it again. And then it fell out of my hands again. The next day, somebody found that dumb screw, right? And it's sitting on the counter again. I don't know if their foot found it. I apologize, kids, if it was you. But I saw it on the counter. I'm like, dang it. Still not in there. So I go and I start, it's not working. I got the Allen wrench again and I was like, what am I doing? Lord, this is silly. This is ridiculous. God, if you can help me, boom, clicked right in. Now, I can't explain cases of the moments where we've prayed and it doesn't happen. I don't know. But maybe for this very moment, because God knew that I was going to be talking with you today, somebody listening needs to be reminded, like I needed to be reminded.
Sure. Yeah.
To take things to God. Don't be anxious over anything. The big stuff and the small stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we have to remember those verses. If he knows the numbers of hairs on our head, he takes care of the little things and provision.
And when we are to be anxious over nothing, what is the command? We're to take it to him in prayer.
Yeah.
And so it may feel silly. This is a tiny screw and this is a towel rack. This is not cancer. This is not countries colliding in war. But God says, do this. And it was just a beautiful reminder to me.
No, that's good. I mean, I was just talking about fatalism, the idea that everything's just kind of finalized. That whatever's going to happen in my life is just meant to happen. And that includes suffering, anything that's just meant to happen is, and yet we can go to him on these things and he can choose to grant that, right? There are things, like you said, I'm going to have a headache today.
Yeah.
A lot of things like that you're just going to. And so the encouragement of just, not just, yes, maybe even first, but not just, God, give me patience, prepare my heart for anything that happens, but also make requests.
Yes.
Make requests.
Why wouldn't you? Did you talk to your mom and dad about getting that thing? Whatever it was? Yeah, you did. Mom, Dad, I really want that Pokemon card. I know you did that.
Oh, yeah.
Mine had something to do with strawberry shortcake.
Okay.
Probably.
Did you get it?
And well, we was poor.
Okay.
But I actually did get a strawberry shortcake, I think from my grandma.
And
anyway.
you were 30 when she got to
Anyway, there was something else that popped up, and Carter, you and I feel a certain way about the topic of abortion. I know that is a very tricky subject. The radio station where we work, they have made it very clear the stance of pro-life. But even if maybe you're listening right now and you're somewhere in between, or you're like, no, I believe that the woman has the right to choose. This is what I want to bring up. The canceling of people. So Little People, Big World, I've never really watched the show on a regular basis, here and there maybe. And it's kind of focused in on Zach and Tori, and Zach is the child of the couple that it originally was about. And they have their own podcast. And they were sharing about the miscarriage that she experienced. And she said to me, when you get pregnant, that's a baby, And so when we lost that baby, it was like we just lost a part of our family. And then she didn't specify when that happened, but they kind of guesstimated around 2021. But previous to this situation, she wasn't very political regarding that topic, it sounds like. And she said, I think being in that room, I'm assuming when it happened, when she miscarried, and being as traumatized as I was, it became black and white for her in that room. I'm not okay with this, Like I would never choose to be in this room and experience this. I don't understand how someone could choose to be in that room. And then her husband, Zach, said, and he mentioned that there are people who've experienced assault People who've experienced just, whether that's within your own family with incest or some brutalization, people do choose to have an abortion based on something like that. And not even getting into that, but he did acknowledge that there is a percentage of people that are seeking an answer by having an abortion. And he said, this is what he shared. He said, if I go out and have beers at the bar and drink and drive and I get into an accident, I'm going to jail. It's a consequence. I chose. He said, we don't think about this, that the choice to have sex was a choice. We want to choose the consequence, the outcome. Mm-hmm. Maybe it was the brash example of a drunk driver that set people off, but people immediately like, we're done.
Oh, he was canceled or whatever.
We used to listen. We used to watch the show. How dare you push your ideas on us? Mm-hmm. We're done. And I think if we close off the conversation, we get in trouble in the United States because we do have a freedom of speech. And we should be able to come to a table and disagree. Mm-hmm. There are moments where you and I have not seen eye to eye on things, but we've always had a good conversation about it. And it's important that we do that in today's society. We're seeing people, they're phobic about a certain subject, or, then he obviously doesn't know anything because he's a man. And we discount the fact that he was a part of a relationship where his child miscarried. Yeah. And this is what he and his wife believe. Right. And so you can't discount it because he hasn't gone through a woman dealing with, having a period, menstruating, all that. And then, because you've never experienced it, you don't even know. But he does know a part of that and can empathize on a certain level. And I think it comes down to showing respect, even if you feel like the other party hasn't. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we need to teach people the way we want to be treated. So if they're treating me brash, if that example was found brash and it hit heavy on the heart of a woman who'd been in a situation with abortion, understandably, that would feel a certain way, right? And I can either cancel that person, or I could try to open my heart to understand what led them to say the thing. On the other side of that, if I feel very strongly about something, I want to make sure that I'm saying it in a way that does try to empathize on certain levels. Have my belief system, share things in truth and love and what I know the Bible tells me about things, and my understanding is this. But I also want them to hear the love part along with the truth part. Yeah. And because when we close down that conversation, as I said before, it's done. Right. We're not going to get through. And the Holy Spirit has to do the work in the person anyway. But a foot in the door with a conversation to somebody is a great way for the Holy Spirit now to have an entry place to do that work in people's lives.
I follow a pro-life account that they actually will go to public events and have a booth and stuff or signs. And I've seen some pro-life people do it incredibly wrong, right? Yeah. But these are pretty good balance. They'll say maybe a sarcastic remark here and there, but generally they're pretty good about being even keel. They just talk about what's true. Mm-hmm. Some of the negativity they get is insane, right?
Defensive.
Oh man,
because they're offended.
It's F-bombs, everything else that's thrown at them, not letting them talk, and they're just saying here, hey, here's just the point, here's the logic, here's the, and but the ones you watch where both are listening, the person that may not feel like them, feels the opposite of them, or at least somebody that's even maybe more open, and then when they explain and then they react, and then when you just see, there's something about when you see somebody thinking and considering, and you just go, and obviously you hope that it's what you believe that they're considering, but even at least just that conversation of thoughts or comments are getting through into somebody's head. Yeah. It's just a powerful thing to watch. And so I think it has to be done that way. I think I just want to say this because I would want to encourage anybody to stand for the right thing even if they don't have, quote, the lived experience.
Yeah.
It's going to be easy for me to say as a white, straight male in the 21st century.
Which I want to go back to what I said earlier.
Uh-huh.
I would not discount Carter's opinion because of what you are.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we should be looking more at the heart of a person if we're questioning their integrity, okay?
Sure.
But you are a daddy. You have been through this circumstance of pregnancy with your wife, and you are a human being in the human race and are allowed.
I think that's
opinion.
an interesting one. I'm a human, but I think here's what's interesting. You keep it at the topic, right? Because I think a 20-year-old kid that has never even had a girlfriend should be able to speak on the subject if something's right and wrong. And it's simply this, the analogy I've heard that's so great. Have you ever, and obviously I hope anybody you talk to has not, but have you ever been human trafficked? And I hope most people would say no. And then you go, well, do you feel that you should speak out on it? And well, yeah, because it's horrific. Well, you don't really have the lived experience, the social credit to speak out on it, according to what you're saying. And I just think that we have to get past lived experience is important. And obviously, if I am whether it's racism or it's a gender equality and things like that, I should be more listening in those situations. But just because I don't have the lived experience doesn't mean I can't stand for what's right, especially if we're following the Bible and we're taking our cues from the Bible. Then I should be able to speak out with truth and love on any subject and culture.
Yeah. You mentioned this a couple weeks ago when your brain latches onto something that's true, then you can close the door on that subject.
You keep an open mind until you find something that's true.
Okay, you said it way different and probably better because that was the original quote. But also, I feel like the Lord was teaching me a lesson in offense. If I'm offended over a certain subject, I mean, I'm not talking about abortion or anything. I'm talking about if there is something that I have had personal dealings with and somebody says something. I can think of right now, I remember when Tom Cruise came out so vehemently against the subject of people dealing with mental illness.
Oh, yeah.
And I was immediately offended. Wait a second. If we've done a podcast with my parents, I lived out a childhood experience of my father's bipolar disorder. And I saw that firsthand. And then my own experience of obsessive compulsive disorder. And I'm like, there is nothing about this that is fake. It's authentically happened.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to watch his movies. I didn't want to, whatever. And then he's jumping on the couch and I'm like, see, he's silly, like making all these excuses.
You're silly.
I got defensive because I was offended. And here I've closed the door now to receiving anything that could be positive from this talented guy. I have since kind of put the kibosh on that because I'm being silly.
You can compartmentalize a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah.
He has his beliefs, even if I don't agree with them. Am I going to say that anything he does now is not a substance? Can I not watch a Mission Impossible movie and not say, wow, that was incredible what he did?
He does his own stunts.
It's
incredible, right? Yeah.
Right? And so it's important for us to find value in one another because that's what Jesus did with us.
Yeah.
He found value and he died for all of us.
Right. Yeah. We are his creation. And we have to realize that everybody, you get into original sin and the doctrine of that and brokenness, and the world doesn't like hearing that.
Yeah.
But that we have to remember that's true. I am broken and that restored through Christ. At the same time, since we are all made in the image of him, there's a capability of good and bad. So just because somebody is a staunch atheist doesn't mean they are incapable of doing good.
Right.
It just means they may not doing it for the right reasons. They also have no reason to do good. Their worldview has no reason. You might as well do whatever you want, but that doesn't mean they're incapable of doing good. And I think, we all have to back up and say, because it's just true, maybe even if you met Tom Cruise in person, or certainly your crazy uncle with his political ideas at Thanksgiving, not your crazy uncle. I'm not naming anybody. But we have to realize, yes, there are certain subjects with certain people in our lives. I am not going to go there. I can't. It's going to be too much. But I was talking to somebody of a different faith recently, and we did say that in general, we as people should be able to disagree and it be okay. And I love the story of my pastor. I've shared it before, but he met an imam, a Muslim leader at a mosque. And the Muslim leader, when they meet for the first time at lunch, and the Muslim leader says, he just bluntly says, "You think I'm going to hell?" And my pastor says, "Well, my tradition would say yes, because if you reject Christ, you would not be in heaven." And the imam says, "Good. I think you're going to hell. And now we can have an honest conversation."
Yeah.
And they're friends now.
Yeah.
And I think that is a beautiful picture of being able to disagree agreeably.
Yeah.
To some degree.
Disagree agreeably to some degree.
Yeah.
Somebody stitch it on a pillow now.
Let's do it. Let's do it. I think that this went very fast. I think that it's about time, honestly.
Oh, my word.
Yeah. So I'm going to save my thing for next week unless you had any wrap-up thoughts.
No.
But yeah.
Other than if you are going to embroider it.
I wasn't.
Oh, okay.
But go ahead. What's your thought?
Well, I was just going to say, like, do it on a sample pillow before the actual pillow.
Okay. I'll keep that in mind.
You want to make sure the font looks right.
How many times have you seen me embroider anything?
Well, listen, there's a first time for everything.
Not in this case.